you can care about people and you can care for people without being romantic or without being pulled into some inappropriate relationship. That's different. Caring about somebody as a human being, that they are a human being who has a story. And it's our job as leaders to know that story on some level and to appreciate that story and what they bring to our team, to our mission, to what we're trying to accomplish together. Welcome to the Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Justin, today I think we should wrestle with the third of the 4 C's of leadership, caring.
You know, when we start to think about caring about the people that we are leading, what are we really talking about? Caring can have so many meanings and so many circumstances. So, what do we really mean when we're talking about caring about people we're leading?
Man, that's a great question. As always, we like to try to define our terms, and I think this is a good example of that. When I think of caring, I think there are really 2 forms when we're talking about caring. And they're pretty distinct. There's caring for someone, and then there's caring about someone. So that's how I think of it.
When you talk about 2 forms of caring, so I guess the next logical question is, what's the difference between them? What's caring about someone and caring for someone?
Yeah, I think when we care for someone, I think that's really directly related to providing for their needs. We might also call it taking care of them, This includes taking care of physical needs like food and clothing, shelter, sleep, other sorts of resources, stuff like that. But it also includes taking care of, when we're talking about leadership, especially developmental needs. The things that we need to do to make sure that those people that we're leading have the skills and knowledge, the capabilities to do their jobs. Shifting gears, when we care about someone, that's really focused on socio-emotional connection, empathy, and being genuinely interested in their welfare and happiness. It includes caring about who they are, their abilities, personality, interests, family, things like that. It also includes caring about what they want, their goals and dreams. And it includes where they're from, that is, their background, the hardships that they've faced, things of that nature. That's all rolled into caring about someone. If we want people to be committed to the team and goal over the long haul, we have to care about them.
That makes a lot of sense, especially, I can easily give an example of being in medicine. Like, we care for people all the time, regardless of who they are, our personal relationship with them. Like, our job is to care for them, to take care of their needs, especially in the form of a hospital. But I see there's a huge difference, and you can't just do that when you're in a leadership role. You really have to care about them. That really seems to be a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exceptional leadership is both. It is caring for someone, making sure that all the things that they need to do their job, whether it's, again, thinking about sleep. As physicians, we know the lack of sleep and what kind of impact that has on our ability to function and do a good job. And so as leaders, we need to make sure that even things like sleep are taken care of. But do they have the resources that they need, whether it's computers or workspaces or whatever it may be, but then really caring about them, who they are as people and what makes them go. I think that's so vitally important.
Well, I can understand that it's obviously important not only to take care of the people in your team's needs, like you're saying, like give them the tools that they need, but also to care for them and to care about them. Do you have an example of like when caring about them actually changed the team dynamics, pushed the team forward, achieved a common goal where it actually mattered that you actually cared about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say, I have a couple of people that jump to mind. One that's probably gonna everybody's gonna resonate with this if they take a moment to do so. But really, just just stop for a second. Take a minute and picture in your head, your own head, right? Someone in your life who has had a profoundly positive effect on you. Someone who perhaps decades later still has an ability to influence you. The question is, did that person care about you? And really make it simple. For me, I think about the teachers that I had growing up. You know, the teachers who loved you, you know, when you were in elementary school, if we want to use the word love, I felt loved. I bet they may, you know, as you think about your teachers, maybe not all of them, but there was at least one, I bet, who made you feel like they really cared about you. I can say my first grade teacher, her name was Ms. Letty Petrie, and I felt she cared about me as a person, as a little kid even. She cared about me, and that made a profound impact on me. That she cared about me conveyed this sense of believing in me, that I could do really great things. Coming from my background, I didn't necessarily have a reason to believe that was true, but the way she cared about all of us instilled in me, at least, I can't say about my classmates, the sense of that I was worth that I could do great things, even as a first grader, you know? I don't know if you, what about you? As you think back, Justin, do you have anybody like that that comes to mind?
Well, as you're telling that story, I almost think about what we've talked about in some previous episodes is the perception that a person cares about you almost carries with it some trust. Like you almost like, I trust this person because they care about me. And when I hear that, I almost think they have my best interest at heart. Not only do they have
Yeah.
my best interest at heart, but because they care about me, as you alluded to earlier, they actually know what I want. They know my needs, my hopes, my dreams, what I personally, as a human, need. And so, not only, like we talked about in previous episodes, not only do I trust their vision, do I trust that they're going to do the right thing, but they actually have the knowledge to do the right thing by me because they care about me and they understand me. They've taken the time to understand what makes me me, what makes me tick, what fills my bucket, if you will.
Right.
And it's that caring. You're exactly right. Because they care, they've gone the extra mile to understand me and then can make the right decision. So I absolutely agree. You know, I guess the question is like, obviously, great leaders, effective leaders have this. They care about their team, they understand the team. But sometimes in leadership positions, like, is it necessary? Like, I mean, isn't it their job to do their job? I don't have time to be everybody's mentor and everybody's dad. Like, do you have to have that? Do you have to care about your team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. And so if you're in it for the next quarter, which is
Mm,
seems to be pervasive in our society at this point, especially when we look at business domains, if you're in it for the next quarter, the short term, some probably would argue that you don't. I'm not in it for the short term. I don't think that great institutions are in it for the short term. And so if you're in it for the long term and or doing things that are really hard, big achievements, legitimately challenging achievements, I think you have to care. Okay? I, I just I don't see a way I don't want to say a way around it per se. Um, but I think you have to. Look, I think investing in people psychologically and emotionally can be difficult. It can be time consuming. Honestly, it can be frightening. Okay? That investment requires being honest, it requires being transparent and vulnerable, and that can threaten the image of the omniscient and infallible leader that some people think they convey. The reality is, everybody knows they're not omniscient and infallible, but sometimes people think they convey that. They're trying to, at least. And so rather than risk it, many people in leadership positions find it easier and safer to maintain distance and avoid that emotional investment and risk that comes with it and present this sort of cold aloofness and call it professionalism. And I think that's rampant in many organizations. Look, Justin, I'm absolutely convinced that choosing to not care about the people we lead is not professionalism. I would say it's masquerading one's egotism, emotional laziness, psychological insecurity as something that sounds palatable or even laudable, and that's so vile. Like, how vile is that? That people are masquerading their own psychological deficits, in a sense, as something laudable, but it's consistently done under the guise of being professional. And I would say, of all things, that may be the most Machiavellian thing a would-be leader can do.
Wow, that's a lot. I was just, as you're talking, I was starting to think about what we've mentioned before of the difference and the overlap sometimes as management and leadership. And this seems to be one of the big ones. Like you mentioned, the quarter, can I achieve X goal without caring about the people? Probably. Can you lead them? Everything you've talked about of leadership, what, like taking the rising tide, lifting all boats. Can we get into the harbor being a manager, not caring about our team? Probably. Can we raise all boats? Can we make everyone better without caring about them? I don't think so. And, you know, we talk about teams, when we talk about elite teams, I think this is one of the differences. Like, this is one of the differences of teams and elite teams. You think about in the military about elite teams. That would be the special forces. Every book that's ever been written, every interview, it talks about this family dynamic. Like, these are my brothers. That conveys what you're talking about. They care about me. They care about me almost like a brother would. And I think you're right. If you want to achieve great things, if you are a leader that wants to achieve greatness, not just something, not just whatever goal you set for yourself or whatever, if you want to achieve greatness, if you want your team to achieve greatness, it does take caring. I do think it probably costs us a lot, you know.
Sure.
Or
at least there's a risk that it could cost us a lot.
Yeah. So many characteristics go in to caring. Can you expand a little bit more on why you think caring is so important? I mean, I think we've touched on it a little bit, but can you go in a little more in depth and like just why did it get one of the 4 C's. Like, why is it so important to great and exceptional leadership?
Yeah, and let me just say from the outset, and this is not directed at you per se, because we're having a conversation, hopefully that is interesting and valuable to those folks who are listening. But honestly, I see it as an indictment on on our world that there needs to be a justification as to why we should care about the people we lead. Right? I mean,
But why?
exactly. I don't have time for that. A perennial reason for why people leave organizations is because they feel unappreciated. No one
100%.
cares about them or what they do. I mean, if nothing else, if for no other reason than because of the amount of attrition that transpires because we those who would lead don't care about their people, that's an enormous one. And we've talked about that previously, this idea of intention to leave and burnout and all those things, right? The turnover. And so if nothing else, that one is enormous. But the basic reality is if you don't care about your people, they won't trust you. And we've hit on that in multiple episodes, right? Trust is a bedrock thing that you must have. Think about it. How much do you trust somebody if they don't care about you? I'll say, if somebody doesn't care about me, I can't count on that person to treat me right or do the right thing. There's a very close relationship between how much you care and how much people trust you. The more they care about you, the more that you trust them. It's that simple. If we don't care about the people we are leading, they won't trust us, and guess what? We won't be able to lead them. Plain and simple.
It's interesting. Like, I feel like this is one of the characteristics or qualities you can't fake. You can't fake it till you make it. Like, people really can tell people you're trying to lead if you care or not. Like, it's not one of those things, so much of this can sort of be boiled down to caring. You read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, and they're like, ask them questions about themselves, get to know, like, it's so much of you need to care about them.
Right.
That's how you influence people, is when you start to care about them, they will care what you say and what you think and where you want to lead them. It's very much a relationship. It's do you think it's something people can fake? Like, I'm not really good at caring about people. Can I fake it? Can I ask them questions about themselves? But I'll remember their name and their birth date, and they'll think I care about them.
I mean, I think that there are certain people with psychopathology, probably. If we really are being honest, there are people out there who have this pathologic profile that allows them, through charisma or other means, to convince certain people. I mean, you see this on these sort of TV shows, not that I watch them, but occasionally I've come across, say, Dateline or whatever it may be, where you've got this person who is a serial abuser, in a sense, not necessarily physical or so forth, but user, maybe that's a better word, of it's usually a guy, right, who is a ne'er-do-well, and he repeatedly connects with these women, takes all their money, and somehow these women really thought he cared about them. Mm-hmm. And he may have a wife and family in some other state, right? And so there are people that have that, but that's not a capability that I think we want to emulate, certainly. So, but I think, to your question, really, aside from those people with that kind of pathologic makeup, no, I don't think so. And I think that most likely in those situations when we are dealing with those people that do have that pathologic makeup, it's probably as much about the person who gets used and what they're hoping for and they're looking for and the position they're in life as it is about that person who is pulling the wool over their eyes. So in a leadership position, no, I think you're 100% correct that we can't fake it.
Mm.
People know, and if we're trying to fake it, people pick up on that, and that just pegs the needle the complete opposite direction of where we want it to go, and that will erode our capability to lead them substantially.
I'm struck by how much this is. I mean, we keep going back to this a lot because so much of leadership is almost like a family type dynamic. Of my oldest son, who's 11, so he's sort of at the age where he really wants to be heard. And I just want to give him the advice and be like, don't make the mistakes I did. So let me just take my advice and listen to it. But he really has a hard time taking the advice if he's not being heard. And it, as I'm listening to you, I realize so much of this is he wants to know I care, that I care about his situation, how he's feeling, what he's going through. And so much of that is caring about him. And then once he understands I care about him, the advice, the direction, the leadership, exactly, he's going to trust it. I also, like, when I think about things I read about or have seen at institutions, nurses going on strike for something, it's exactly what you said. It's usually not about money. It's usually not about benefits. They don't feel valued.
Right.
And I'm thinking it's almost a meme now. It's so universal of like, oh, we showed them we cared. We gave them a pizza party. Like that
Right.
just
appreciation day.
And that's what I think about when you're like people trying to fake it. Oh, we gave them an employee appreciation day.
Here's an umbrella.
Exactly. We gave them an umbrella, and they can see through that. They're like, they don't even know my name. They don't even know who I am. And it's exactly what you said. If they cared about the people they were leading, this wouldn't be a problem. So I guess you don't have to convince me that caring about the people you're leading is of the utmost importance. But how do we do it? How do we do it practically? Like, how do we care about those we're leading? How do we invest in them? How can we give our listeners some practical advice of like, okay, this may be the thing you want to put on your mirror and you really want to work on, caring about the people I'm leading. But how do you get there?
Well, I would say, how do you know when people care about you? What do they do that makes you know when they care about you?
A lot of times it's our interactions. Like, do they ask me about something? Are they invested? And usually that's in the form of they're asking questions that give them no benefit to know the answer to. They don't ask me, hey, where are the TPS reports that need to be on my desk? You're not asking about that, something that they need to know, but they're asking something that shows they have insight into my own concerns, my own needs. Hey, I remember your kids are starting school. How are they doing with that transition? Hey, I know your mom was sick. How's she doing? How are you doing in work? Are you like things that necessarily, they don't mean a checkbox on them and they're not some bottom line. So I guess the question is like, how do you develop those skills as a leader to demonstrate? Is it just repetition? Is it, you do it? And
I think that some of it, I think a lot of it is modeling. As I think about people who've cared, that they made me feel valuable to them, that I was important in some manner. And I want to emulate that. That goes way back, and you learn so much of leadership. I think people learn or don't learn as they're growing up. And so I think a lot of it is that sense of seeing somebody, feeling, really, it's more like feeling the effect of their caring for me, caring about me as a person. And as you said, with no real end goal or product that's going to benefit them per se, at least that is observable. And so I think the way that we demonstrate that, I mean, I hit on a few things earlier, right? I talked about caring for, and I talked about caring about. And so it's doing those things. If you want to, you got to do both of them. Care for somebody. If you have a team of people that you're working with, look, in the hospital, when I don't know what electronic medical record they have at your institution, there are only a couple of big ones, right? But when you're dealing with an electronic medical record that takes an excessive amount of time, all I need is this lab. Let's say a genetic report. They figure out ways to hide those so that no one can mine them. The dwarves of Lord of the Rings couldn't mine out where the genetic report is in most EMRs, and that's kind of important. Like you're talking about like major findings, and how frustrating that is. And if somebody actually cared, they would fix this thing so that it wouldn't take us 25 minutes of clicking around all over the place to find something that in the end was normal, right? And the frustration that comes with that. And so that's an example just of caring for somebody in what they're doing, right? In their job. If you're trying to lead this organization, care for people's needs in what they're doing. And then caring about them, again, we talked about who they are, what's important to them, what experiences and hardships they've had, getting to know people. To anybody who's listening, you can be assured that there's somebody in your organization, probably a lot closer to you than you realize, who's going through some major event. Maybe it's a personal reckoning with cancer. Maybe it's a close family member who has some illness. Maybe it's a loss of a pet that they hold dearly that really has been important to them. It could be a number of things. Maybe their roof is leaking. Maybe their AC is out. Whatever it may be, right? They're going through some struggle, and most of the time we're oblivious to that. But when we're not, when we invest in those people and we know who they are and what they're about and what they're facing, that makes all the difference in the world. I mean, look, multiple studies have shown that when we care about the people we lead, that has such tremendous effects. I mean, I can include some references, in the description and the show notes and all that, but it's been proven time and again that caring about those we lead results in increased engagement and productivity from our team, more collaboration, the morale improves, turnover, as we hit on earlier, decreases. Here's some fascinating numbers for you, and I see them as contrasting. So most people know who Daniel Goleman is. He's done a lot in the domain of emotional intelligence. And in 2000, he published this paper in the Harvard Business Review and found that when employees feel like their leader cares about their growth and their development, again, that's growth and development is more on the caring for side, right? It's being sure that people are getting what they need to be able to do their job. But when a leader does that, those people are 60% more likely to remain with the organization for at least 3 years. Now, if we talk about the inverse of that, there was this study just a few years ago, 2020, where the researchers found that 59% of people who leave their jobs, and we touched on this a minute ago, cite their manager's indifference to their well-being as being the primary reason.
Wow, that's huge.
Just from
that's a huge number.
Business standpoint, okay? If we want to cut out the humanity, and we're much more about the humanity here on the Science of Leadership, but it just makes all the sense in the world to care about your people and care for them.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on this, on something you touched about a little bit earlier, but I want to go back to it. I can see someone listening to this and saying, you know what, but as a good leader, I need to be separate from my people. I can't be friends with them. I can't get into that. To lead them, I need to be separate from them. I can't be in the barracks playing cards with them because I need to be their leader. And almost use that in an extreme and in a hyperbole to say, so I can't really care about them. I've got to be step back. I've got to be separate to make hard decisions of maybe sometimes I've got to fire these people and sometimes I got to promote people that maybe. How do you respond to that? Because obviously I agree with you that caring about people makes effective teams. But what about the people who would say, I can't do that because I need to be separate from them. I need to be separate to be a leader.
Sure. That's probably the leading pushback, if we say that, argument, whatever that you want to call it, with regard to caring about people. Again, going back to what I said earlier about that just being Machiavellian as can be. But as somebody who was in the military, I totally understand this principle of, in the military, when you have officers and then you have enlisted, and there's not supposed to be fraternization between the officers and the enlisted. And the reason for that is so that you can maintain chain of command and leadership authority. But that isn't synonymous with caring. So this came out in one of our episodes where I was interviewing Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, and he was talking about this concept that came from General Marty Dempsey when he was in Iraq, and in the book I talk about this, or actually General Dempsey talks about this. And so, long story short, is when General Dempsey was in Iraq and he was the commanding general, for every person, every soldier that died under his command, he made a little card that had the picture of the soldier, had their name, something about them on the back, married, whatever it may be. And he kept that in a little box that on the top of it was engraved, "Make it matter," that the loss of this person should not be in vain. And he had 132 people die during his time there in Iraq. And he went to every service for those fallen and told the other members of their team, make it matter, make it matter. And to this day, when I was interviewing him, he reached into his pocket and he pulled out one of those cards.
Hmm.
And so you can care about people and you can care for people without being romantic or without being pulled into some inappropriate relationship. That's different. Caring about somebody as a human being, that they are a human being who has a story. And it's our job as leaders to know that story on some level and to appreciate that story and what they bring to our team, to our mission, to what we're trying to accomplish together. So, yeah, you got to maintain some degree of objectivity, no doubt, because you have to make the tough calls sometimes. You may have somebody that you really like, but if they're a total dud, cannot accomplish their job, then you got to let them go. I would say, it's not dissimilar from being a good parent.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, to this day, my dad made it very clear from very early on that he was not my friend. Did I ever doubt that he cared about me? No. But he was always my dad.
Yeah.
But he was not my friend. And I think that it's exactly what you said. It really, I think it, almost mirrors that. Can you be a good leader and care about your people? Obviously. And I would even piggyback on what you were saying. If you've got to deliver somebody bad news, I would be as someone who maybe was taking bad news, if I had to get fired and I really thought that that person cared about me, I think it would actually be easier to take, to be like, wow, they've actually thought about this. And as much as you can accept that, as much as you can trust their judgment, if you really know that they care about you, you know that they're doing the right thing and they care about the rest of the team too.
Yeah.
So I agree. It's very much like a good parent relationship.
Yeah. Well, I use a sort of approach that your dad has used. I can't tell you how many times I've told my kids know I love them to a level that's unquantifiable. Okay. They know that. But I have repeatedly told them, my job here is not to be your buddy. My job is to be your dad. My job is to see the end goal and help you get there. And sometimes that means I'm going to, ask things of you that you may not want me to ask. I'm going to have to tell you things that you may not want to hear. But in the end, it's for that end goal. And
Yeah.
so far, with a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old, they appreciate that and see the love and the caring that's there.
So, as we sort of wrap this up, and I think, I hope we've convinced our listeners just of how important that caring is for effective and exceptional leadership. If we could leave them with one practical thing about caring, how to do it, what's something they can do tomorrow, tonight, this week, next month, and really sort of see the real world impacts that caring can have? Like how do they apply that to their own team?
Yeah, I will share a story that I think that gets at the practical of it. because as I've thought, as we were coming into this, and I was thinking about people that I look back on and I say, that person had a tremendous influence on me and care, and it was from a caring standpoint. I was absolutely certain of it. So when I was in high school, in this little high school uh, in Appalachia, we were chosen as one of 7 high schools in the state of Tennessee to have access to the supercomputer, the world's fastest computer. This was 1992, okay, before the internet. I mean, really.
The
But we had
1900s, if
these,
you will.
yeah, we had these terminals that we had 4 terminals, I think, or 5 in this one room, and they had a direct connection to the Cray supercomputer at Oak Ridge National Lab. Okay. If I would have had my head on straight, I could have been like Bill Gates or whatever. But anyway, but but in that we had this program, and they at these 7 schools, and it was called Adventures in Supercomputing. And we each were assigned a mentor, and my mentor was a guy named Rick Loudon. Okay, he's from Latrobe, Pennsylvania, home of Rolling Rock, and he will tell you that every time he says Latrobe. Okay, I mean that guy, he's so proud of Latrobe and Rolling Rock beer, but Rick, he's at that point I was living, I was starting my senior year in high school. It was my grandmother, my mom, my sister, and I living in my grandmother's house. And Rick came and was like this big brother figure. He was just trying to help me with this project, right? He had no compulsion to actually care, but he came and met me and my family and took me out to eat and said, "Hey, what do you want to do in life? Where are you coming from? What do you want to be? How can I help you?" He was able to procure an Apple IIe. I mean, old school.
I remember that thing.
And he loaned that to me, a computer. And I mean, I didn't have money for much at all. But suddenly I had this computer, and I could do stuff on this computer at home, and then I could do the stuff with the computer, like the legit computer at school. And I cannot quantify the impact that Rick still has to this day, and the way that I approach other people and I try to invest in them is an echo and a tribute, I hope, to what Rick did when I was 17 years old, and that he continued to do throughout my college time. He had me come into his lab and work in the summers, and there's absolutely no doubt that without Rick and his impact on me, I wouldn't have gone to medical school. I wouldn't be where I am today without that. But it was all based on he cared for me in a practical manner. He stopped and said, "Here's this young man. I want to know something about him." And that's the way that if we're going to be leaders, that's what we got to do. Whenever I have somebody who approaches me and says, "Hey, I'm really interested in you being my mentor," the first thing that I do is I schedule an appointment with them. And it's usually on the order of an hour and a half or 2 hours. So finding that time is hard, but that's a big investment. And I sit down and I just say, "Tell me your story." And most of the time they'll tell me some very thin version of that, it's polished up as if they're interviewing for medical school or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
no. I want to know the real story. I want to know, tell me about your family. Tell me about your parents. Tell me about all these things. Because if I'm going to mentor you, I need to know who you are, where you come from, what you're about, what you're hoping to achieve, so that I can help you get there as best as I can, right? And so I would say for our listeners, if you want to have that kind of legacy, that kind of impact that Rick Loudon had on me, man, a long time ago, is still having on me. Do that. That's the first step. I mean, if you just do that, you'll be better than 99% of leaders on the market. That's the practical thing I would say. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
No, I think that's exactly right. My son, as he's going into middle school, that's essentially what I told him. I was like, listen, you're going to be with kids that you don't know anything about, that are coming from different schools. I was like, if you really want to expand your footprint, get to know more people, don't talk about yourself.
Yeah.
Ask
right.
them about them. Show them that you care. If you really care, show them that you care. And the easiest way to do that is to ask them about themselves, to show them like you're
actually
not here
be
to,
interested in the answer.
Yeah. When's your birthday? Where are you from? What sports do you play? Ask them something to get to know them. And that shows them that you care. So I'm thinking about it as you're doing that, like, who am I going to, like, almost like, we're talking about putting them on the bathroom wall or on the back of our door or something like that. Like, who am I going to ask what today? Something not about work. Ask someone something.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've told your kids something very similar that I've told my son. He asked me, how do I make friends? How do I, honestly, at his age, how do I get a girl to like me? Right. and I said, the single key is to make people feel good about themselves in your presence. If you do that, who doesn't want to be around somebody like that?
That really is the boiling down. I mean, that could almost be a definition of caring right there. People feel good about themselves in your presence, even if their situation is bad or their circumstances are bad.
Right.
I feel safe. I feel valued. All these things we talked about. I feel valued. I feel cared for. All of that. And I really want to touch on one last thing.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up, of what you mentioned is caring about the answer, not only asking the question, but active listening about the answer and really caring about the answer, not quickly thinking what you're going to say next or how you're going to respond, but really taking in what they're saying and being interested in the answer. That's solid gold right there.
Man, it is. I don't know that we can end on any better note. Well, thanks, Justin. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.